Hello everyone, welcome back to our American Literary Period series. In the previous episode, we got to know the Native Americans and their literary works and their oral traditions before the year 1607. 1607 is the year which witnessed the establishment of the first English colony in America, Jamestown. So we mentioned that the oral traditions were not performed in English, but in the indigenous peoples' languages. So today we are starting with the colonial and early national period between the year 1607 till the late 1820s. In this lesson, I'll talk about the subperiods within the colonial and early national period. We'll talk about the historical context and literature of the colonial period, the revolutionary period, and the early national period. All of these subperiods are included, and we'll get to see the main themes and characteristics of this literary period in American literature, and we'll get a kind of revision by displaying the representative authors and their literary works during this period in American literature. By the end of the lesson, I'll mention what I'm going to do next in the following episode. So let's get started. So the colonial and early national period between 1607 till 1820s or 1830s in some resources, we can divide this American literary period into three sub-periods. The colonial period, the longest one, then we have the revolutionary period, and then the early national period. Some scholars divide the sub-period of colonial period into early colonial and late colonial. Anyways, the three sub-periods are colonial, revolutionary, and early national period. It's important to remember, as I mentioned in every lesson, all the dates are not exact and certain. They are approximate date. You might find them slightly different in other resources. So in this lesson, I'll talk about each subperiod separately. I'll mention the historical context of each one, and we'll get to see the important authors and their literary works. So let's start with the colonial period. Before we start with the colonial era, it's important to remember that the colonial and early national period in American literature is an important one, as it witnessed many historical and political events that shaped the American identity and literature. So we can start now with the first sub-period, which is the colonial era. And here I'm starting with the early colonial era between 1607 till 1775. As I mentioned many times, the year 1607 witnessed the establishment of the first English colony, Jamestown. Another important incident took place in 1619, which is the arrival of the first 20 African servants who arrived in America. Some scholars consider it as the beginning of the slavery incidents in America. And we have another important document signed in 1620, which is the Mayflower Compact. This is an important document as it shows like an early example of self-governance in the colonies. As you know, in these or in those times, the colonies were under the British Empire. So this Mayflower Compact was like among the first self-governance documents. We also witnessed waves of immigration between 1630 and 1643, as many English Puritans immigrate to Massachusetts Bay in America, and we witnessed a very significant war in 1636 until the beginning of 13 of 1638, we have the Pequot War. This is a very important war. It happened between the colonies on one side and the native indigenous people of America on the other side. And this war resulted in like the victory of the colonies over the indigenous people. So it had a very significant effect later on. Let's now move to the like late colonial era. Now let's talk about the major conflicts and movements between 1642 and 1783, like the late colonial era. We have the English Civil War, which took place between 1642 and 1651. And we have a very significant incident in early American history, which is King Philip's War in 1675 and 1676. It's considered as one of the most devastating wars. It was between Native Americans on one hand and New England colonists on the other hand. We have also in 1692, around that period of time, we have the Salem witchcraft trials, which were a series of like trials of people accused of witchcrafting, and these people were sentenced with really heavy and unacceptable sentences. Some of them got death penalties, and of course, most of them, unfortunately, were women. And we have also this movement called the Great Awakening between the years 1726 and 1756. It's a wave of religious revival sweeping through the colonies in America. And we have also an important incident, and it's like considered the beginning of the revolutionary era in this period, which is between 1775 and 1783, the American Revolutionary War. And it had armed conflict between the 13 American colonies. Now, as far as literature was concerned during the colonial era, we have some famous figures and their literary works. We have Anne Bradstreet. She composed poetry, blending and combining faith and personal emotion. This is one of her literary works in honor of that high and mighty Prince Queen Elizabeth of happy memory. And she dedicated many poems to her children and grandchildren, like this poem, On My Dear Grandchild Simon Bradstreet. We have also this important literary work of Plymouth Plantation by William Bradford. And we have Mary Rowlandson, a narrative of the captivity of Mrs. Mary Rowlandson. This author, she was captivated during one of the battles by the Native Americans, and she stayed in captivity for around 11 weeks, and then she wrote about her experience there. And we have Jonathan Edwards, and he was famous for personal narrative and his literary work, A Divine and Supernatural Light. Now let's talk about the historical context and some important incidents during the Revolutionary era between 1765 and 1790. This is the second sub-period in this episode today. So it's important to remember that some of the events, especially the latest ones, will overlap with the last sub-period, which is the early national period. So we have these incidents between 1775 and 1783. We have the American Revolutionary War, and we have the Declaration of Independence in 1776. And we have George Washington elected as the first president. And in 1803, the US government buys Louisiana territory from France. Later on, we see similar actions as they buy other territories from Spain, like I think Florida. And we have also the war against England between 1812 and 1814. Some of the important literary works during the Revolutionary era. We have Thomas Paine's Common Sense. In this literary work, he calls for the independence of the colonies in America and for the establishment or the independence of America. And we have his other work, The Crisis. In this work, he uses an uplifting language to raise the morals of Americans who lived some difficult times during the war and the revolution. And we have this document or this text by Thomas Jefferson, Declaration of Independence. And we have an exchange of letters between the two brothers, John Adams and Abigail Adams. These two brothers, as I mentioned, exchanged hundreds of letters. These letters gave us a great idea about life in America at that time, the family issues, the gender roles, and many things about the society in America at that time. Now we reach the third and last subperiod within the main period that we are talking about. As I mentioned earlier, I will not talk about the historical incidents and the historical context since I've already mentioned these incidents in the previous slides when I talked about the revolutionary literature, and I said that these incidents overlap between the revolutionary and the early national literature. So now I'm talking about some of the main literary works and the important authors between 1783 and 1830. We have the famous figure whose picture is on the 100 note dollar, uh, Benjamin Franklin, and his literary work, The Way to Wealth, and his famous text, The Autobiography. And we have also Phyllis Wheatley, whose poetry blends classical form with liberty and faith. And one of the important works that we can mention is On Being Brought from Africa to America. And we have Charles Brown literary works like Memories of Carwin, a fictional character. And we have the Beloquist, also a very important and famous literary work by Brown. Also, the Beloquist is a character that appeared also in other works of Brown. We see this character in Brown's Wieland, also another literary work. Now, let's talk about the themes and the topics that were common during that literary period. We see religion and divine providence, especially in the works of William Bradford and Anne Bradstreet. We see topics like survival, as in the struggle to endure and adapt to the new world environment. And we have also the theme of sin and redemption. Let's not forget that many of the writers were Puritans. Uh, so these literary works explored moral trials and salvation. We have also this theme, which is freedom and independence, like the ones we see in the literary works of Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson. And we have here the beginning or the birth of this topic that we'll see frequently later, which is the American dream. And we have also topics or themes related to reason versus faith. And also we have civic virtue and republicanism, as in the works of Benjamin Franklin. And we have, of course, identity and nationhood. As you remember, this literary period witnessed the establishment of the United States of America. Now, as a kind of like review of what we have mentioned so far, we can summarize by talking about the representative authors and their literary works during this literary period, the colonial, revolutionary, and early national period in American literature. So we can mention the important names of John Smith, William Bradford of Plymouth Plantation, this literary work, and we have Anne Bradstreet and her emotional poems. We have Cotton Mather, we have Jonathan Edwards, and a very important literary work called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And we have, of course, Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, Thomas Paine, Common Sense, and we have Phyllis Wheatley. She composed poems on religion and patriotism. So that's it. I hope that I gave you a good idea about this American literary period, the colonial, revolutionary, and early national literary period. In the next episode, I'll talk about Romanticism. Don't confuse it with Romanticism of English literature. This one is totally different. So in the next episode or lesson, we'll talk about Romanticism in American literature between 1820 and 1865. Thank you and hope to see you soon.